Tonight, a shooting massacre. Terrorist attacks target 2 mosques in New Zealand, leaving at least 49 people dead.
And after blaring raid sirens signaling terrorist rocket attacks on Israeli citizens, Israel strikes back, hitting 100 military targets inside Hamas-controlled Gaza.
It makes a difference.
Back in Washington, Democrats are pushing a federal bill to ban widely defined discrimination against LGBTQ Americans.
And a new law in Kentucky marks a major pro-life victory.
All this and more tonight on Faith Nation.
Targeting Muslims in New Zealand. Welcome to Faith Nation. I'm John Jessup.
And I'm Jenna Browder.
Well, we begin tonight with the tragedy on the other side of the globe. 49 people are dead and at least 48 injured after the shooting massacre in New Zealand.
The 2 separate shootings targeted 2 mosques where hundreds of Muslims were praying in the city of Christchurch. At least 3 suspects are in custody tonight. CBN News White House correspondent Ben Kennedy has the latest on the deadliest terror attack in New Zealand history.
Well, John and Jenna, New Zealand's Prime Minister calls it one of the nation's darkest days. This was a well-planned strike and the first terrorist attack on New Zealand soil. Worshippers at midday prayers gunned down at 2 mosques in the city of Christchurch.
He just came in, he was shooting, and I'm thinking that, if I get out, I'll get shot, so I'm just keeping my fingers crossed.
In addition to those killed, nearly 50 others wounded. Multiple IEDs were also discovered attached to vehicles.
Clearly, what has happened here is an extraordinary and unprecedented act of violence.
Behind that violence, police say is a man in his late 20s, now charged with murder. 2 others are also in custody. Faith leaders like Russell Moore tweeted that we should pray and work for swift justice against these murderers.
We're obviously greatly disturbed by this, what seems to be a terror attack, this hate crime in New Zealand.
President Trump tweeted, "My warmest sympathy and best wishes goes out to the people of New Zealand," adding that the U.S. stands by New Zealand for anything we can do. God bless all. As for the motive, it's reported the man claiming responsibility posted an anti-immigrant manifesto online. The suspect even live-streamed the attack on social media.
I'm 66 and never thought in my life I'd live to see something like this.
And to put things into perspective, the sheer magnitude of this attack, the National Police Statistics report that more people were murdered in this one attack than are usually killed in an entire year in New Zealand. Officers are now warning people to stay away from mosques in the event of violence. Ben Kennedy, CBN News, Washington.
Senseless violence. Thanks, Ben. Well, world leaders have been quick to express condemnation for the attacks, expressing sympathy for and solidarity with New Zealand.
Gordon Robertson, the CEO here at the Christian Broadcasting Network, offered his heartfelt condolences and a strong condemnation of his own. Here's Gordon.
We have freedom of religion, we have freedom of assembly, and we're not going to let this kind of terror attack deter us. We need to have a free and open society. What we're running into is a bizarre dialectic where the rise of Muslim extremism, the terrorism that comes with that, has now led to a rise in white nationalism and fascism. Here's what this gunman said. He said, "For once, the person that will be called a fascist is an actual fascist." It's just bizarre to me. Anyone would ever want to claim to be that. How did fascism arise? Well, it arose from the National Socialist Party in Germany. It was originally a political movement. And it arose in response to what communism was doing on the other side of the Russian border, and they became virulently anti-communist. And in that, somehow struck a chord and got enough support to get elected to office. It's absolutely bizarre to me that anyone would want to go back there. The terror that they unleashed, the murder that they unleashed, let's not go there.
In political news tonight, religious freedom advocates are sounding an alarm on the new Equality Act. Democrats introduced this version, touting it would be ban discrimination based on sexual orientation. But as CBN's Abigail Robertson explains, opponents say the bill is anything but equal.
Males identifying as females using the women's locker room. Faith-based adoption and foster agencies required to place children with same-sex couples. And florists forced to fill orders for same-sex weddings. Critics tell me these are just a few of the potential results if the Equality Act becomes law.
Every American should be treated with dignity and respect, but our laws need to protect the constitutionally guaranteed rights that we have.
Greg Baylor in the Alliance Defending Freedom handled numerous religious liberty cases in states where laws like the Equality Act already exist.
Now, under the Equality Act, we will have a nationwide law, so we will see a proliferation of instances where Christians and others are being coerced to violate their beliefs in order to comply with such a law.
While introducing the bill, Democrat lawmakers talked about making the protection of same-sex individuals a priority over other constitutional freedoms.
We cannot allow claims of religious freedom to be used to discriminate against an LGBT individual.
It makes a difference when any level of government or any corporation says that this sort of discriminatory behavior and action is wrong. It makes a difference. And it provides those of us in our community, the LGBTQ community, with the tools that we need to fight back.
Baylor maintains the bill does much more than that.
One of the interesting things about the Equality Act, compared to the last version, is that it actually strips us of our...
The bill is expected to pass a Democrat-controlled House and even has a few Republican supporters. But as of now, the Senate is not expected to bring it to the floor this session. Reporting from Capitol Hill, Abigail Robertson, CBN News.
Thanks, Abby. Monica Burke is a religious liberty expert at the Heritage Foundation. I sat down with her earlier to discuss a piece she just wrote titled 7 Reasons Why the Equality Act is Anything But. Monica, when people hear a phrase like the Equality Act, they think that's something that we all can get behind, but you say not so fast.
Yes, so the Equality Act really is anything but. It's kind of a misnomer. The Equality Act would actually further inequality by hurting everyday Americans. It could be used to impose a nationwide bathroom bill. It could be used to impose a national preferred pronoun policy and yet another health care mandate.
The Equality Act raises the profile of cases like Jack Phillips, the Colorado baker who refused to bake a cake for a same-sex wedding, whose case went all the way to the Supreme Court. So we know how this affects business owners. How does it affect average Americans?
It could affect the average American in a lot of different ways. So it could affect not only businesses, but it could be used to shut down charities. There's a center for women who have experienced sexual abuse and trauma and been sex trafficked all the way in Anchorage, Alaska. And they've actually been sued on the basis of gender identity because someone who is a biological male wanted access to their shelter. So it could affect those affected populations. It could be used to coerce medical professionals to perform transition-affirming therapies against their best medical judgment, which in turn would politicize medicine, which would create an expectation that all physicians pursue those courses of therapy. And they could potentially affect families and parental rights for parents who don't want to pursue that course of therapy for their children. So it has a ripple effect throughout society.
You wrote an article about the ways that this could affect people. One of the ways that you also mentioned was compelling speech. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
The problem with the Equality Act is that by the law speaking and saying this is what we're going to accept now as the new cultural norm, it actually precludes any kind of compromise. It precludes people coming up with local solutions that respect everyone's freedoms, that ensure we treat everyone with respect. So absolutely, we want to further dignity for all people, including LGBT individuals. But this bill is not the solution. It would actually further inequality.
So how should people respond?
So the way that we always want to respond to any of these sensitive topics of debate is always first and foremost with compassion. We want to make sure that we're speaking with respect and with plenty of deference to our opponents, and understanding that typically they're operating with the best of intentions. We all want to live in a country where the dignity and respect of everyone is recognized. But we need to also be very clear about why this bill is problematic. And so become familiar with the status of sexual orientation and gender identity laws and policies in their local school district at the state level. And then from there, they should speak articulately and clearly about the legitimate concerns that we have about the Equality Act.
Well, the president is welcoming Jewish exiles from the Democratic Party. In a tweet, President Trump said the Jexodus movement encourages Jewish people to leave the Democrat Party, and that Republicans are waiting with open arms. The president and other Republicans have criticized Democrats for controversial comments made by freshman Congresswoman Ilhan Omar, criticizing the U.S.-Israel relationship and engaging in anti-Semitic tropes.
Well, for more on all things politics, we bring in our chief political analyst, David Brody. David, thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Good to be back again.
Always. Nice to have you.
David, to President Trump's tweet, what is he talking about exactly with this Jexodus?
Well, look, it's kind of, I don't want to call it, it's all made up. It's not, because there's a few millennials, Jewish millennials, that kind of started this on a website that's fledgling, if you will. It's just starting out. But he saw a Fox and Friends segment, then he went ahead and tweeted about this Jexodus. And so, look, I think that's what he's trying to do, kind of gin up some controversy here and basically say, you know, come to the Republican Party. We're for American Jews. But the truth of the matter is American Jews pretty much have a home already in the Democrat Party. We have some figures. I want to put them up real quick because I don't come to the show prepared. I mean, I do come to the show prepared. What am I talking about? 52%, take a look, of American Jews are Democrat, 31% independent, 15% only Republican. As we continue on, you can see that in the disapproval of President Trump among American Jews very high, 71%. 26% approve of the president. And then look at what Donald Trump did in terms of the Jewish support in the election. Mitt Romney had the highest Jewish support, 30%. Donald Trump at 24%, tied George W. Bush, and then John McCain at 22%. So there's some work to be done. He wants to kind of, you know, make some strides there.
Yeah, David, we've seen this is really a bipartisan issue, anti-Semitism. Does the president look political here, you know, making a tweet like that?
Well, sure. You definitely look. I think this is the kitchen sink strategy for Donald Trump. You know, let's try to get you know, a percentage or two of American Jews here. Let's try to get some folks that are really against socialism here, and you just kind of mix and match all of it together. And I think at that point you cobble together what you hope to be electoral victory in 2020. And I think that's the plan. That's why he can go after the, as he calls Bernie Sanders, the nutty professor, and you know, call Elizabeth Warren Pocahontas. He's trying to kind of just like muddy the field. So it's all political, for sure.
You know, some people might ask, what does he have to gain with a tweet like this? But maybe the question is, what does he have to lose with a tweet like this?
Yeah, no, I think it doesn't make any sense, personally. I mean, look, American Jews are not going to go for Donald Trump or the Republican Party much more than they're already going for the Republicans.
Maybe the thing to splice here is the difference between the support for Christians who support the Zionist movement versus Jews who are typically, like, liberal Jews who are typically encamped with the Democratic Party.
Well, that's a good point. So 35% of American Jews are Reformed. Those are the liberal Jews. Then they're conservative Jews. That's about 25% or so. And then you have 10% are the Orthodox Jews. Those are the real, those are kind of the Zionist Jews. Those are, you know, the evangelicals and the Orthodox Jews really get together on stuff. So there is a schism between the two. Well, I don't know. We'll see.
What about his son-in-law, Jared Kushner? Is he Orthodox? Is he conservative? Where does he fall?
Well, he keeps kosher, and so he falls. But it's either conservative or Orthodox. I think it's conservative. I don't think it's Orthodox. Having said that, they do keep a kosher home. They put the phone away on Saturday, believe it or not. Jared Kushner and Ivanka Trump both do that.
David, switching gears here to this whole the southern border, the president's declaration that basically Congress, voted against. Well, this resolution, they voted for it. The president just vetoed it. What is the signal about the president and a split with him and some of the Republicans?
Well, first of all, to the base, it signals that he's going to go to the wall for the wall. And so this is politically very astute by the president. It'll help him in 2020 as it relates to Republicans. Look, I think personally and politically, this is great for the president. He has outed these Republicans who say they're for border security and then went ahead and pretty much voted against it. I know they said constitutional reasons, but look, Ted Cruz came out and he was for it. And he said because this vote was not about the Constitution, this vote was on border security, and there's a law in place already. So,
all right, David Brody.
That's it. That's all I have.
Thank you.
Thank you.
David. Coming up, who wrote the first books of the Bible? How a new film tries to settle an ancient question when we come back.
Tonight, a ceasefire between Israel and Hamas. Israel warplanes overnight hit 100 Hamas military targets in the Gaza Strip, striking Hamas terrorist headquarters and an underground rocket-making installation. The retaliation came after air raid sirens Thursday signaling terrorist rocket attacks on Israeli citizens who took cover in bomb shelters. The two Iranian-made rockets fired into southern Israel and Tel Aviv by Hamas mark the first such incident since 2014.
While across America, as some schools and universities. But as Chris Mitchell reports, a new movie offers strong evidence for the authority of the Bible and one of its best-known authors.
The new film, Patterns of Evidence, The Moses Controversy, looks at a debate entering today's college classrooms.
The Moses controversy is really the question of, did Moses write the first books of the Bible? And for a lot of Christians, it's not a controversy at all. But as soon as you send your son or daughter off to college or university, they're going to hear a different story.
Film producer Timothy Mahoney says this lack of understanding is rampant in today's higher learning.
It's huge, the number of people in mainstream scholarship that don't believe that Moses was the author of the first books of the Bible. And so they're basically saying, well, this is just a beautiful piece of literature, but it's not real history.
And Mahoney says that's the issue.
The problem with that is that Jesus believes that Moses wrote the first books of the Bible. In fact, Jesus says, "For if you believe Moses, you would believe me, for he wrote of me. But if you do not believe his writings, how will you believe my words?"
Mahoney traveled thousands of miles and spent years investigating the Moses question.
What I realized is that if Moses doesn't exist and Moses didn't write these first books of the Bible, this impacts the rest of the Bible.
While many mainstream scholars cast doubt on the history and archaeology of Moses, Mahoney says he can show why they're wrong.
In fact, this film is going to show you Bible-affirming evidence that Moses had the ability to write the first books of the Bible.
With biblical values under assault in today's culture, Mahoney says his project can speak to both believer and skeptic.
Now, if you have a family member that doesn't believe, and you've been looking for an opportunity to bring them to something, such as, or to talk to them about the Bible, this film is a perfect tool for that because it's done very scientifically.
Mahoney says today's generations have doubts and ask tough questions.
But there are answers for these questions. We don't have to lose our sons and daughters, to skepticism.
Mahoney says in order to know God, people need to know his word, and he hopes his film will tie that understanding together.
It shows that this ability to do exactly what was commanded in the Bible fits the history and the archaeology, matches the Bible. The pattern of evidence fits.
Chris Mitchell, CBN News, Jerusalem.
And for more news and analysis on the latest developments in Israel, tune in to Jerusalem Dateline with Chris Mitchell tonight and every Friday evening at 9:30 Eastern on the CBN News Channel.
When we come back, the conversion story of a woman who says she murdered more people than Ted Bundy.
Well, a newly passed pro-life measure in Kentucky is the target of a lawsuit from the American Civil Liberties Union. The state legislature approved a bill banning most abortions once a fetal heartbeat is detected, sending it to the desk of Governor Matt Bevin late Thursday night. But the ACLU has filed a suit saying the measure is unconstitutional. That prompted a response from Kentucky's pro-life governor. Bevin tweeted at the ACLU saying, quote, "Bring it. Kentucky will always fight for life, always."
Well, after performing hundreds of abortions, something changed for Dr. Kathy Altman.
Charlene Aaron brings us the story of how a spiritual revelation transformed the former pro-choice practitioner.
Kathy Altman wanted to be a doctor so she could help women. After receiving her license, she took a job at a Florida women's clinic to perform abortions.
There was no question in my mind that a woman should have the right to choose whether she wanted to be pregnant or not. And that was the most important thing. I didn't consider the fetus in the equation at all.
Altman went on to become director of a local Planned Parenthood, where she says examining the parts of aborted babies fascinated her.
I was looking at it completely from a scientific standpoint, totally devoid of any emotion. And it was amazing. And I used to send the different parts down to pathology. And then on our pathology rotation, we would look at those slides. And it fascinated me.
She even performed abortions while pregnant.
I didn't see any problem with that. My baby was wanted, their baby wasn't. It didn't seem to bother the women that I was aborting. But yeah, I saw no contradiction in that, no problem with it.
Dr. Altman said the only time she had qualms about what she was doing was when she worked in the intensive care unit for newborns.
That's where Altman found herself trying to save babies who were the same age as those she killed. Thoughts she quickly dismissed.
If she wanted the baby, then I did everything I could to give her a happy, healthy baby. If she miscarried, I would be distraught with her and upset about losing that baby.
After having her first child, the doctor came face to face with 3 cases that changed her thinking. One involved a young girl who had 3 abortions, all performed by Altman.
I went to the clinic manager and I said, I don't want to do this. She's just using abortion as birth control. And they said, I didn't have the right to make that decision. Wasn't a judgment that I should be making, and I needed to do the procedure.
In 1983, after attending a church service and a private meeting with the pastor, Altman became a Christian.
He gave me Josh McDowell's Evidence That Demands a Verdict. It was that point that I finally understood who Jesus was, and at that point, really, I committed my life to him. And then he just started the long, hard work of transforming me.
Part of that transformation included no longer doing abortions. Still, Altman held on to her belief that a woman had the right to terminate an unwanted pregnancy. 2 years later, after reading an article comparing abortion with the Nazi Holocaust, she saw herself as a mass murderer.
I probably murdered more people than Ted Bundy or any of the mass murderers, if you consider all the abortions that I did.
After talking with a Christian counselor, Altman received much-needed peace and healing.
And during that time, in my mind, I could see Jesus's gown and his feet. And I was at his feet crying, and he said to me, are you more powerful than I am? Are you more important than I am? Are you stronger than I am? That I can forgive you, but you cannot forgive yourself. At that point, I understood that he had forgiven me and that I needed to forgive myself. And And that was where I really had my healing.
Limbs and organs.
Altman is now retired and has dedicated the remainder of her life to fighting for the unborn. As a board-certified OB/GYN and a fellow of the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists, she recently urged lawmakers to pass the Heartbeat Protection Act, a measure that would ban abortions at 6 weeks of pregnancy after an unborn baby's heartbeat is detected.
I support the Heartbeat Protection Act because it uses the heartbeat, a very concrete sign of life that people can identify with, to define when the fetus should be protected.
She is grateful every day for the opportunity to speak for those she once silenced.
I'm so thankful that he's using me to save babies now, when once I used to kill them. And that's very healing and restorative in itself.
Charlene Aaron, CBN News, Jacksonville, Florida.
Well, thanks for joining us for this edition of Faith Nation.
Have a great weekend.